Hey guys, welcome to Priceless B-Movies. I'm your host Colin Price, and today I'm going to review for you a movie from the mid-90s that was kind of notorious for there being all these graphic lesbian sex scenes, which is kind of weird because there aren't. Bound. Bound is a movie, like I said, from the mid-90s. I believe it was 1996 when this film came out, and it was directed by the Wachowskis, the same people who brought us great classics like The Matrix and other movies like Jupiter Ascending that, well, aren't great classics. The movie stars Gina Gershon as an ex-con who gets a job in this apartment building in Chicago, and one of the tenants in this apartment building is played by Jennifer Tilly. Jennifer Tilly's character kind of hits on Gina Gershon and seduces her, and they become this couple, which is kind of the reason that the movie was so notorious when it came out, which is kind of interesting to me. You see, when this film came out, I was still, I think it was just starting middle school. Like, I really didn't have much of a concept of what the movie was. I wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies. I certainly wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies that were rated R because there was supposedly a lot of sex. My parents were both, you know, real Catholic, and so that just wasn't really in the cards for me to see this when it came out. I did finally see it for the first time about 6 or 7 years ago, and I picked up a copy of it for like $2 in a pawn shop here in Champaign, and took it home thinking, well, at the very least, you know, from what I've heard about it, you know, it won't be boring. Imagine my surprise, though, when about an hour into the movie I realized that this movie is not so much about the fact that these girls are lesbians as it is about this really suspenseful and smart mystery thriller that's going on in the plotline. See, Jennifer Tilly's boyfriend, who is completely unaware that she's attracted to women, he's played by Joe Pantoliano, and he's with the mob. And he's I guess you would call it a cleaner for them, you know, he's a money launderer, he kind of cooks the books, so to speak. And he ends up with a whole lot of money that he's having to launder, and Jennifer Tilly and Gina Gershon come up with this plan where they're going to rip him off, take the money, and run away together. This movie is actually very Hitchcockian in a lot of ways, and what I mean by that, I mean, for one, a lot of the shots, a lot of how different shots are framed and how things are edited, how the film kind of looks, the entire style behind it is very reminiscent of movies like Dial M for Murder and Psycho and Vertigo, all those great Hitchcock films that had these real weird looks to them. And this film does a great job of emulating that. It feels like a Hitchcock film or a Brian De Palma film. There's other movies that I've reviewed on this page that I've said, you know, kind of they get away with the same thing, but this film, more than a lot of some of those other films, really pulls this off. The other reason I think it's like Hitchcock is Hitchcock had this great rule that he followed in at least a handful of his movies. It was one of his many rules of suspense, and what he would do was he would either have characters explain how a heist or how a murder or how some criminal act is supposed to go. And you would see on screen this imagined scenario where, you know, this person sneaks up on this person or robs this person blind or plants this murder weapon here. This real intricate plot that seems foolproof at the time when you're watching it. But then when it's time to actually do the deed, everything goes wrong, and the tension kind of comes from, okay, now all these surprises have come out at us. Are these people that we're rooting for gonna make it out of this? And there's a lot of films today that utilize this technique, even movies like Inception, where it's like, okay, we're going to go into, in that movie, we're going to go into his mind and we're going to do all that. And it seems so simple until, from the get-go, they're screwed and now have to figure their way through the rest of the film. Bound does this as well, because the plot that the women come up with seems like it's a great idea, and then everything starts to go to shit. And you got to wonder if either of these two women are going to make it out of the movie alive. Acting-wise, I think Gina Gershon is really good. Jennifer Tilly, I can't really stand in a lot of things, and I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to go ahead and be that guy when I say that just her voice. I get that works for some people, but her voice is just kind of like nails on a chalkboard for me. I think she's a great actress, but even when I watch like Family Guy sometimes, and you know, she's Bonnie, Joe's wife in the cartoon, and I just think that, man, when I hear that voice, sometimes it's like, oh, it's pleasant, kind of light and airy, and then other times it's like just a screech. I hate to speak ill of any celebrity for something they can't really control, but, you know, there were a couple points in the movie where it kind of took me out. But I was able to deal with her in this movie a lot better than I've been able to deal with her in some of like the Chucky movies and some other films that she's in, but that still kind of grates me a little bit. Joe Pantoliano is great in this too. It's really easy to see why the Wachowskis kind of cast him as a sleazy character in The Matrix soon after this film. Here he plays a sleazy character, but also, once again, I'm going to reference Hitchcock. It's almost like watching an old Cary Grant performance in a Hitchcock film, because he has these moments where it's like, is he going crazy? Or is he's trying to figure out who's screwing him, and the whole time he thinks it could be anyone except his girlfriend. So you see him kind of lose it a little bit more and more and more as the film progresses, and you almost feel sorry for him, because up to that point, yeah, he's involved in the mob, but he hasn't done too much that's really that terrible himself. Some of the other mob characters have, but not really him. He's more just kind of a weasel. I almost felt bad for him in a couple of scenes up until the end of the film, where he does kind of go full-blown villain, and at that point you are supposed to really despise him. As per the sex scenes, I'm not gonna lie, yes, this is an R-rated film, but there's only like one sex scene I could think of. It's like 20 to 30 seconds, and it's shot fairly tastefully. I really don't know why, when this movie came out, I heard, around the schoolyard and from, adults, if I was eavesdropping a conversation, people talking about this movie, where it's just this, softcore porno. No, it's really not. In fact, for a film that's almost 2 hours, to have only about 20 seconds of sexual activity and be known for being a sex-filled film, I really don't know how a lot of people got that into their heads. I think it was just the way that the movie was advertised as being more sexual in nature than it is. The movie spends much more time being about the dynamics between the women and their relationship than anything physical. I mean, hell, if you've seen any average slasher movie from the 80s, you've seen more boobs and more action than what's in this film. That's really not what this movie is about, even though it kind of gets the reputation for being like that. For once, I'm actually going to agree with Roger Ebert and give Bound 4 stars. I think this is a great film. I think it's a misunderstood film, and I think that it's largely because of the way that the movie was presented. I think because it had all the hype, because, it was kind of weird at the time. I think this was like right between like Showgirls and Striptease and kind of these sleazy adult films. A lot of people, I think, misunderstood what this movie was before they saw it. And I do think that a lot of people who talk about this movie, and the sexual content in the movie, probably haven't even actually watched it. They've just heard it referenced in movies like Seed of Chucky and stuff, where they're constantly talking about, this sex scene in this movie. And when it's really what they're talking about isn't actually in the film. I think that this is a movie that a lot of people should see, because I think that they would get an experience that they aren't expecting out of it. This is a very smart thriller, and it's one of my favorite mystery and suspense films from the 90s. That's my review of Bound. Stay tuned, I got a lot more reviews coming. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Priceless B movies.